The crack of a high-caliber rifle echoed across the Afghan mountains. Another Navy SEAL dropped, the seventh in under 3 minutes. Their position had been compromised, the extraction helicopter still 5 minutes out. Through his blood-streaked tactical goggles, Lieutenant Commander Hayes watched his men fall one by one to an invisible enemy. "Sniper Ridge, position, approximately 1,400 meters," shouted the team's spotter just before a round tore through his throat. From their position in the valley, death seemed inevitable. The Taliban marksmen had them pinned with surgical precision. No cover, no escape, no hope. Then came a sound, distinct different from the enemy's rifle. A single shot from somewhere behind their position. A moment of confused silence followed. Through his radio, Hayes heard the impossible. "Tango's down. Extraction path clear. This is Ghost Hunter. You're welcome, boys." The voice belonged to a woman. Yeah. The perfect shot doesn't just happen, gentlemen. Master Chief James Granite Wilson's gravelly voice carried across the Coronado sniper range with the weight of his 62 years. His weathered face, carved by desert winds and mountain cold, commanded absolute attention from the 12 SEAL operators assembled before him. The California sun glinted off the silver in his close-cropped hair as he gestured toward the legendary 1,200-meter target. 20 years ago, I put a round dead center on that target. Still holds the base record. The younger SEALs exchanged knowing glances. Everyone knew Wilson's story. The old man never let them forget it. That shot wasn't luck. It was science, discipline, and thousands of hours mastering the fundamentals. Wilson's mind drifted momentarily to another desert, another time. Iraq, 1991. Operation Desert Storm. The endless sand dunes where he'd earned his reputation as one of America's deadliest snipers. The memory of his first confirmed kill at 800 meters still vivid. The Iraqi officer dropping mid-sentence, his men scattering like startled birds. Environmental conditions must be read perfectly, Wilson continued, snapping back to the present. Wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, elevation, and the Coriolis effect must all be calculated and compensated for. Senior Chief Nathan Hawk Hayes nodded respectfully at his mentor and admirer. At 35, Hayes represented the bridge between Wilson's old-school techniques and modern technology. Beside him stood Petty Officer Marcus Ace Reynolds, 30, the team's rising star sniper with 4 confirmed kills on his last deployment, and Staff Sergeant Michael Thunderbrooks, 34, built like a heavyweight boxer with hands steady enough to perform surgery. "The Barrett M82A1 is unforgiving of error," Wilson said, patting the massive rifle on the table beside him. "But when mastered, it delivers death with certainty at distances most shooters can't even see." The atmosphere on the range shifted suddenly as all heads turned toward the access gate. A woman in civilian clothes, jeans, boots, and a simple navy blue windbreaker walked calmly onto the restricted firing line. She appeared to be in her late 20s, medium height, athletic build, with dark brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Nothing about her appearance suggested anything extraordinary. Reynolds snickered. Brooks crossed his muscular arms with obvious amusement. Wilson stepped forward, his expression a mixture of annoyance and condescension. "Are you lost, ma'am? This area is restricted to qualified military personnel only." The woman met his gaze with calm, gray-blue eyes that seemed oddly familiar to Wilson. "No, Master Sergeant," she replied quietly, using Wilson's old rank before his promotion. "I'm not lost. I'm here to break your record." Wilson's eyes narrowed. Only someone with intimate knowledge of his service history would know he had once been a Master Sergeant. And something in those eyes triggered a distant memory he couldn't quite place. The SEAL operators exchanged amused glances, barely containing their laughter. This woman, this civilian, had just announced her intention to break a record that had stood for 2 decades, a record set by a legendary warrior at the absolute peak of his abilities. "Ma'am, this is an active SEAL training facility," Hayes said, stepping forward with professional courtesy. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Hayes. If you're here for the administrative tour, it departs from the main building." "I'm not here for a tour," she replied, her eyes never leaving Wilson's face. "I'm Lieutenant Alexis Morgan, 75th Ranger Regiment. I believe Commander Richards informed you of my arrival." Wilson's expression changed instantly. The name Morgan struck him like a physical blow. His mind raced back 30 years to another face, another pair of gray-blue eyes that had stared down rifle scopes beside him in a dozen hellholes around the world. "Morgan," he repeated slowly. "Any relation to Mark Morgan?" A flicker of emotion crossed the woman's face before she regained her composure. "He was my father," she said simply. Wilson fell silent, memories cascading through his mind. Mark "Phantom" Morgan had been more than just another sniper. He had been the best. The stories of his impossible shots during covert operations were still whispered among Special Forces operators, and his death in Somalia in 1993 during the infamous Black Hawk Down incident had become the stuff of legend, sacrificing himself to save his unit, including a younger James Wilson. Reynolds stepped forward, skepticism evident on his face. "With all due respect, ma'am, the 75th Rangers are an elite unit, but what we do here requires years of specialized SEAL training." Alexis turned her attention to Reynolds, her expression neutral. "I'm aware of the differences in our training, Petty Officer. That's why I'm here to learn from your methodologies and share ours. Commander Richards calls it cross-pollination." Brooks chuckled. "Cross-pollination? Is that what they're calling it now?" Wilson shot Brooks a silencing glare before returning his attention to Alexis. "Lieutenant Morgan, I served with your father in 3 theaters. He was the best I ever saw." Wilson's voice grew quieter, more personal. "I was there in Mogadishu when he didn't come back," Alexis finished for him. "I know Chief Wilson. He spoke highly of you in his letters home." The Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle rested on the table between them, a .50 caliber harbinger of death, capable of neutralizing targets at extreme distances. The weapon system weighed 29.7 pounds unloaded. The scope alone was worth more than most civilian cars. The rounds it fired could penetrate light armor at 1,500 meters. Wilson gestured toward the weapon. "Are you familiar with the Barrett system?" In response, Alexis approached the table with practiced movements. Her hands moved over the weapon with the confidence of someone who had field-stripped similar systems hundreds of times. She checked the chamber, examined the barrel, and inspected the scope mount with methodical precision. Mark 1-13 Mod 7 with Schmidt & Bender PM25-2556 scope, customized trigger assembly reduced to 2.5 pounds of pressure, and what looks like a custom-milled bolt carrier, she observed, heavier than our SHATAC, but with better stability in crosswinds above 15 knots. The SEAL operators fell silent, watching her hands move over the weapon with undeniable expertise. Wilson's weathered face broke into the ghost of a smile. "Mark would be proud," he said quietly. "He always said you had his eyes." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Coronado Range as Wilson led Alexis and the SEAL team to the observation area. The older man moved with the deliberate gait of someone who had survived too many jumps from aircraft and too many miles with heavy packs. "Your father saved my life in Somalia," Wilson said quietly, his voice meant for Alexis alone as they walked. "Operation Gothic Serpent, Mogadishu, October 3, 1993. Alexis nodded, her eyes scanning the range distances, 600 meters, 800 meters, 1,000 meters, and finally the legendary 1,200-meter target that represented Wilson's long-standing record. "I know," she replied. "You were pinned down after the second Black Hawk went down. My father provided overwatch from the 3rd building on Halwadik Road." Wilson stopped walking, surprise evident in his face. "How could you know that? Those operational details were classified." "He kept journals," Alexis said simply.
"Released to me when I joined the Rangers, along with his ballistic calculations and methodologies." Wilson's mind traveled back to that hellish day in Mogadishu, the suffocating heat, the constant crack of AK-47 fire, the streets swarming with militia fighters, and Mark Morgan, cool as winter steel, picking off threats one by one from his perch, 6 stories up, creating a corridor of safety for the pinned-down operators below. "The night before he died," Wilson said, his voice growing distant, "he told me something that's haunted me for 30 years. He said there was a traitor inside our intelligence apparatus, someone who had sold out our positions, our movements. He was going to take the evidence to command when we got back to base. Alexis's expression hardened. He never made it back. No, Wilson confirmed. The next day, he took a position to cover our emergency extraction. Textbook setup, perfect sightlines. Then something went wrong. His position was compromised, specifically, deliberately. He held them off long enough for us to get out. His last transmission was just static. The memory still burned in Wilson's mind. The helicopter lifting off, Wilson reaching out as if he could somehow pull his friend from the chaos below, watching helplessly as Morgan's position was overrun. Reynolds approached, interrupting the moment. "If you don't mind me asking, Lieutenant, where did you learn to handle a Barrett? That's not standard Ranger equipment." Alexis's expression shifted to professional detachment. "After my father died, I was focused. A former SEAL, a friend of my father's, took interest in my development. He trained me from age 14 in advanced marksmanship." 14? Brooks asked incredulously. "My childhood ended in 1993, Alexis replied without emotion. Wilson watched her carefully. There was more to her story than she was sharing, but this wasn't the time to press. "Lieutenant Morgan has been deployed as a counter-sniper specialist with the Rangers for the past 6 years, Wilson informed the team. Her record in Afghanistan and Syria is impressive. "With respect, Chief," Reynolds interjected. "Range shooting and combat shooting are different worlds." "I'm aware, Petty Officer Reynolds," Alexis replied calmly. "That's why I'd like to demonstrate my capabilities on your legendary 1,200-meter target first." Brooks laughed out loud. "Ma'am, with all due respect, most first-timers on this range start with the 600-meter target. The 1,200 is, well, there's a reason the Chief's record has stood for 20 years. Alexis didn't respond to Brooks directly. Instead, she turned to Wilson. "If you don't mind, Chief, I'd like to examine the environmental conditions before attempting the shot." Wilson nodded, curious about her approach. He watched as she removed a small device from her pocket, a Kestrel weather meter, military grade, used to measure wind speed, temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. Standard equipment for long-range shooters, but her methodical approach to gathering data impressed him. As she worked, Wilson noticed a small scar at her temple, partially hidden by her hairline, the kind of scar left by a bullet that comes too close. This was not novice. This was a combat veteran with her own ghosts. "I've been tracking a high-value target for the past 3 years, Alexis said suddenly, her voice low enough that only Wilson could hear. "A contractor-turned-terrorist who goes by the call sign, the Surgeon." Wilson's expression darkened. "I know the name." Precision kills, often from extreme distances, rumored to have been CIA trained originally. "He was," Alexis confirmed, adjusting her weather meter to capture another reading before he sold his skills to the highest bidder. "He specializes in killing American special operators, particularly snipers." "And your interest in him is professional?" Wilson asked, already suspecting the answer. Alexis looked up from her instrument, her gray-blue eyes so much like her father's, cold with purpose. "I believe he was in Mogadishu in 1993, she said. "And I believe he arranged my father's death. 3 years ago, he killed my mother, too. She was CIA, still investigating what happened in Somalia." Wilson absorbed this information silently. The pieces were starting to align. This wasn't just about breaking a shooting record. Alexis Morgan was hunting a ghost from the past, a ghost that had taken everything from her. "Chief," she said, her voice taking on a new intensity, "I need to break your record today, not for glory, but because where I'm going, the shots I'll need to make will be even harder, and I need to know I can make them." The afternoon sun hung low on the horizon, casting golden light across the Coronado Range. Perfect shooting conditions, minimal wind, stable barometric pressure, excellent visibility, the kind of day snipers dream about. Reynolds had just completed his attempt at the 1,200-meter target, missing by mere inches, an impressive shot by any standard, but not enough to challenge Wilson's record. Brooks followed with similar results. Both men were exceptional marksmen, among the best the Navy had produced. Now it was Alexis Morgan's turn. She approached the shooting position with quiet confidence, carrying the Barrett M82A1 as if it weighed nothing, though the massive rifle was nearly half her body weight with its loaded magazine and accessories. Lieutenant Morgan will now attempt the 1,200-meter qualification, Hayes announced formally, following range protocol. Reynolds leaned toward Brooks, whispering, $10 says she misses by at least a foot. Brooks shook his head. Sucker bet. That's a 20-year record held by one of the best snipers in SEAL history. No offense to the Rangers, but this isn't their specialty. Wilson watched Alexis with growing fascination. Her preparation was unlike anything he'd seen before. After setting up the rifle on the shooting rest, she removed a small notebook from her pocket, worn leather pages yellowed with age, her father's journal. She consulted a series of handwritten tables, making calculations based on the environmental readings she'd taken earlier. What's she doing? Hayes asked quietly, standing beside Wilson. Something I've never seen before, Wilson admitted. Some kind of custom ballistic calculation. Alexis made minute adjustments to her scope settings, far more precise than the standard military ballistic tables would suggest. She was accounting for variables most snipers didn't even consider. Harmonic balancing, she explained, sensing their curiosity. A technique my father developed after studying with a former KGB sniper during a joint operation in the late 80s. It accounts for barrel harmonics and their effect on bullet trajectory at extreme distances. Wilson's eyebrows raised. The Soviets were advanced in some aspects of long-range shooting, but I've never heard of this technique. It was never widely shared, Alexis replied, making one final adjustment to her scope. The Cold War ended, the program was discontinued, and most of the documentation was destroyed. My father's notes are likely the only remaining record. She settled into position behind the rifle, her posture textbook perfect. Her breathing slowed visibly, reaching the controlled rhythm all precision shooters strive for. Her cheek welded to the stock, her eye aligned perfectly with the scope. The SEAL operators watched in fascinated silence. Whatever they had expected from this Ranger lieutenant, it wasn't this level of technical expertise. Send it when ready, Walton said quietly. Alexis's finger took up the slack in the trigger, applying pressure with microscopic precision. Her body was completely still, as if she had transformed into an extension of the weapon itself. The Barrett roared, its massive .50 caliber round tearing through the air at nearly 3 times the speed of sound. Through the spotting scope, Wilson watched the target 1,200 meters downrange. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with almost theatrical timing, the center of the target erupted in a cloud of dust and fragments. "Hit!" the range officer called out. "Dead center!" Before anyone could react, Alexis cycled the bolt with lightning speed and fired again. The second shot came less than 2 seconds after the first, impossibly fast for such a heavy rifle. "Second hit!" the range officer shouted, disbelief in his voice. "Same hole, double tap at 1,200 meters!" The range fell silent. A double tap? 2 shots hitting the exact same point at 1,200 meters was considered virtually impossible. The minute variations in powder charge, air density, and a dozen other factors should make
such precision unattainable. Reynolds's mouth hung open in shock. Brooks stood motionless, his crossed arms falling limply to his sides. "How?" Hayes finally managed to ask. Alexis stood smoothly, her movements as controlled as her shooting. The second shot uses the atmospheric disruption created by the first round. If fired within the correct time window, approximately 1.8 seconds, for this distance, the second bullet follows essentially the same path through the air. My father called it ghost trailing. Wilson stared at her with newfound respect. Reynolds never taught that technique. He was still perfecting it when he died, Alexis said, her voice carrying a hint of sadness beneath its professional tone. I spent 15 years completing his work. Wilson was about to respond when the base alarm system erupted in a wailing cry of urgency. Red emergency lights began flashing across the facility. Commander Sarah Richards burst onto the range, her face tense with urgency. At 42, Richards was the senior operations officer for SEAL Team 6, with command experience in every major conflict zone of the past decade. Wilson Hayes, get your team geared up immediately, she ordered. We have a hostage situation requiring immediate response. 12 American personnel, including 3 diplomats and a nuclear physicist, are being held at a compound on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Hayes and his team snapped to attention, all thoughts of the shooting record instantly forgotten. Wheels up in 30 minutes, Richards continued, full mission briefing on the aircraft. As the SEAL operators moved with practice efficiency toward the armory, Richards turned to Alexis. Lieutenant Morgan, she said, her voice lowering. Your counter-sniper expertise is now mission critical. Intelligence confirms the hostage-takers have deployed at least 8 highly trained marksmen in elevated positions around the compound. Wilson, who had remained behind, looked between Richards and Alexis with growing suspicion. This wasn't coincidental, was it? He asked. Morgan's arrival just before this mission. Richards' expression remained professional, but her eyes betrayed the truth. The situation has been developing for 72 hours, she admitted. Lieutenant Morgan was specifically requested for this operation due to her expertise in countering precision ambush tactics. Alexis checked the Barrett, confirming it was cleared before preparing to move. Commander, she said, her voice taking on a new intensity, what's the identity of the hostage-taker? Richards glanced at Wilson before responding. Intelligence identifies him as a former contractor, known by the call sign, the Surgeon. Alexis's expression hardened into something cold and dangerous, a look Wilson recognized from decades of warfare. It was the expression of a hunter who had finally located their prey. Then it's not a coincidence, Wilson stated flatly. He's been waiting for her. It appears so, Richards confirmed. Intelligence suggests this entire operation was designed specifically to draw in Lieutenant Morgan. It's a trap, Wilson concluded. Yes, Alexis agreed. Her voice calmed despite the implications. But not for me. She began walking toward the armory, her purpose evident in every step. For him. The emergency briefing room hummed with controlled chaos as maps, satellite imagery, and intelligence reports were distributed among the assembled operators. The wall screens displayed real-time footage from surveillance drones circling high above the target compound, a fortified structure nestled in the mountains along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Commander Richards stood at the head of the table, her expression grave. Gentlemen and Lieutenant Morgan, this is a priority Alpha hostage recovery operation. 12 American personnel, including 3 diplomats and a nuclear physicist, are being held at a compound on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Wilson studied the compound layout, his experienced eye immediately identifying the tactical challenges. Multiple buildings, elevated positions with commanding fields of fire, limited approach vectors, a defender's paradise. The captors, Hayes asked, already making notes for the assault plan. 20 to 30 combatants, Richards replied, heavily armed, former military based on their movement patterns and defensive positioning. They're being led by this man. The screen changed to display a grainy image, a tall figure in tactical gear, face obscured by a balaclava, directing operations in the compound. Known only by his operational call sign, the Surgeon, Richards continued. Former CIA asset who went rogue approximately 12 years ago. Since then, he sold his services to various terrorist organizations and hostile states. Specializes in targeted killings of Western Special Operations personnel. Reynolds glanced at Alexis, who was studying the image with intense focus. "What's his interest in these hostages?" Brooks asked. "Unknown," Richards admitted. "But based on Dr. Chambers' expertise, we have to assume the worst, that he's after nuclear information." Wilson turned to Alexis. "Lieutenant Morgan has been tracking this target for some time. Perhaps she can provide additional insight." All eyes turned to Alexis, who had remained silent during the briefing. She stood and approached the screen, analyzing the terrain surrounding the compound. "The surgeon is a precision killer," she explained, her voice clinical and detached. "He treats assassination as a science. These hostages aren't his primary objective. They're bait." "For what?" Hayes asked. "For us," Alexis replied simply. "Or more specifically, for me." Richards nodded grimly. "Intelligence supports Lieutenant Morgan's assessment. This appears to be an elaborate setup designed to draw in a specific response team." Wilson's eyes narrowed. "Why go to these lengths? Why not just target Morgan directly?" "Because it's not just about killing," Alexis explained. "It's about proving superiority. The surgeon doesn't just want me dead. He wants to defeat me at my specialty on terrain he's chosen under conditions he's controlled." She pointed to the elevated positions surrounding the compound. "These 8 positions aren't random. They're precisely placed to create interlocking fields of fire, a death zone where any conventional assault team would be eliminated before reaching the compound." Hayes studied the positions with new understanding. "She's right. Those positions cover every approach vector, textbook ambush setup." "Which is why Lieutenant Morgan's counter-sniper expertise is critical to this mission," Richards concluded. "Without neutralizing those overwatch positions, a direct assault would result in catastrophic casualties." Reynolds, who had been skeptical of Alexis from the beginning, finally spoke up with respect. "Ma'am, how exactly is one sniper supposed to neutralize 8 elevated positions simultaneously?" Alexis turned to face him directly. "Not simultaneously, petty officer. Sequentially, in a specific order that creates a shadow corridor, a temporary blind spot in their coverage through which your assault team can move." Wilson nodded with growing appreciation. "Like a precision breach in their defensive perimeter." "Exactly," Alexis confirmed. "But the window will be extremely narrow, perhaps 2 minutes, from when I take the first shot until their defensive network recalibrates." "That's not much time to cover 300 meters of open ground," Brooks observed. "It's all we'll have," Hayes replied. "We'll make it work." Richards checked her watch. "Wheels up in 15 minutes. Gear up and proceed to the airfield." As the SEAL operators moved to collect their equipment, Wilson approached Alexis privately. "There's something you're not telling us. Something personal about the surgeon." Alexis hesitated, then met Wilson's gaze directly. "The night before my father died in Mogadishu, he sent a coded message to my mother. It contained evidence that a CIA asset had compromised their operation, selling intelligence to the local militia. That asset's code name was the Surgeon." Wilson's expression darkened with understanding. "You believe he arranged your father's death?" "I know he did," Alexis replied, her voice calm, but filled with a deadly certainty.
Hardening. "And 5 years ago, he killed my mother when she got close to proving it. She was found with a single shot to the head from 800 meters away. His signature. Why didn't you tell me this during the briefing?" "Because this isn't about vengeance, Chief Wilson. It's about completing my father's mission, exposing a traitor who spent 30 years killing Americans while pretending to serve our interests." Wilson studied her face carefully, the face of Mark Morgan's daughter, now a woman with her father's skills and her own demons. "Your father was the best I ever knew," Wilson said finally. "If you're half the sniper he was, the surgeon doesn't stand a chance." A ghost of a smile crossed Alexis's face. "I'm not half the sniper my father was, Chief." Her eyes held a cold certainty that sent a chill down Wilson's spine. "I'm better." The armory buzzed with practiced efficiency as the SEAL team prepared for deployment. Each operator moved with a mechanical precision that comes from thousands of hours of training,
checking weapons, securing tactical gear, testing communications equipment. Wilson found Alexis in a quiet corner, methodically assembling a weapon system he didn't immediately recognize. It wasn't the Barrett from the range, but something more specialized. Checac M200, intervention, she explained, noting his interest. Modified with a custom carbon fiber barrel and proprietary trigger assembly. Wilson examined the weapon with professional appreciation. The Checac was renowned for its extraordinary accuracy at extreme distances. A sniper rifle. Effective range? He asked. 2,300 meters with standard ammunition, Alexis replied, securing the massive scope to the rail system. Up to 2,500 with these. She opened a small case containing rounds that looked unlike any Wilson had seen before. Each bullet was meticulously handcrafted with unconventional geometry and what appeared to be micro-grooves along the projectile body. Custom loads, she explained, developed specifically for ultra-long-range interdiction. The design maintains supersonic flight 20% longer than standard rounds, reducing transitional ballistic instability. Wilson's eyebrows raised in surprise. That's advanced beyond anything in our current arsenal. It should be, Alexis replied, with a hint of pride. I designed them. As she continued preparing her equipment, Wilson sensed an opening to address what had been bothering him since their earlier conversation. I've been carrying something for 30 years, he said quietly, his voice dropping to ensure privacy. Something I need you to know before we deploy. Alexis paused her preparations, giving Wilson her full attention. The day your father died, Wilson continued, his weathered face showing the weight of old guilt. He made me promise something. He said, if I don't make it back, take care of my family. It was the last thing he ever said to me. Wilson's hand, steady through decades of warfare, trembled slightly. I meant to keep that promise. I tried to find your mother after we returned, but she had already gone dark, CIA protocol after losing an operative in the field. By the time I located her again years later, she'd remarried and you were in college. I thought you were both better off without the past haunting you. Alexis absorbed this information silently, her expression unreadable. I was wrong, Wilson admitted. I should have been there. Maybe if I had, your mother would still be alive. The surgeon would have killed her anyway, Alexis replied, her voice calm but firm. And probably you, too. He's methodical, eliminating everyone connected to what happened in Mogadishu. How did you get involved in hunting him? Wilson asked. The Rangers aren't typically assigned to counter-terrorism assassination missions. Alexis's hands moved automatically, loading the massive Checac rounds into the magazine with practiced efficiency. After my mother was killed, I found her files. Everything she'd gathered on the surgeon over the years. I took them to my commanding officer, but the official investigation went nowhere. Too many redactions, too many dead ends, too many officials unwilling to dig into CIA black operations. Her eyes hardened with remembered frustration. So I continued her work unofficially, used my leave time to follow leads, cultivated sources in places Rangers aren't supposed to have sources. Eventually, I built a profile detailed enough to track his movements, predict his behaviors. And your training, Wilson pressed. The techniques you demonstrated today go beyond standard military sniper schools. A faint smile crossed Alexis's face for the first time. After my father died, a man came to our house, a former Spetsnaz operator who had defected during the Cold War. He said he owed my father his life. When he learned I wanted to follow in his father's footsteps, he offered to train me. Russian methodologies. Wilson nodded with understanding. That explains the harmonic balancing technique. Nikolai trained me for 10 years, Alexis confirmed. Every weekend, every summer, while other girls were going to parties, I was learning to read wind patterns and calculate ballistic trajectories. She locked the magazine into the rifle with a decisive click. When I was 16, Nikolai took me to the mountains in Wyoming, set up a target at 1,600 meters, farther than any shot my father had ever made.
Said I couldn't come down until I hit it. How long did it take? Wilson asked. 3 days, Alexis replied. 3 days on that mountain, making adjustments, learning to read the environment, understanding how bullet and air interact at extreme distances. When I finally hit the target, Nikolai just nodded and said, "Now you begin to understand." Wilson studied her with new respect. Her story explained the extraordinary skill she demonstrated on the range. This wasn't just talent or standard military training. This was a lifetime of single-minded dedication. "Your father would be proud," Wilson said quietly. "Maybe," Alexis replied, with a hint of uncertainty for the first time. "But I'm not doing this for his approval. I'm doing it because the man who arranged his death is still out there, still killing Americans, and after 30 years, it's time someone stopped him." She stood, the massive Chaytak rifle slung across her back, looking remarkably like her father had all those years ago. The same determined set to her jaw, the same unwavering focus in her eyes. "There's something else you should know, Chief Wilson," she added, her voice dropping to ensure only he could hear. "The intelligence on this mission isn't complete. The surgeon won't just have 8 snipers in those positions. He'll have a 9th, his personal insurance policy, and a location no one expects." "How can you be sure?" Wilson asked. "Because it's what I would do," Alexis replied simply. "And he trained with the same man who trained me." The C-17 Globemaster III thundered through the night sky, its cavernous interior transformed into a mobile command center. Maps and tactical displays illuminated the faces of the operators as they made final preparations for what everyone now understood was an extraordinarily dangerous mission. Wilson, to everyone's surprise, had insisted on joining the operation. At 62, he was well past the age for field deployments, but his experience and knowledge of both the surgeon and Morgan made him invaluable. "I should be on the ground with the assault team," he argued when Richards questioned his decision. "Negative, Chief. Your expertise is needed, but your days of door kicking are over. You'll provide tactical oversight from the command position." Wilson knew she was right, but it didn't ease the frustration of sending others into danger while he remained behind. At the rear of the aircraft, Alexis was conducting a final briefing on the insertion method, a hey-ho jump that would allow the team to infiltrate undetected. "High altitude, high opening is our only viable approach option," she explained, pointing to the mountainous terrain surrounding the compound. "We'll exit at 30,000 feet, approximately 15 miles from the target. Oxygen systems are required. We'll deploy canopies immediately and conduct a silent glide approach along this ridgeline, which should mask our presence from ground-based radar." Hayes nodded in agreement. "The hey-ho insertion gives us our best chance of achieving surprise. The question is, what happens once we're on the ground?" Alexis shifted the tactical display to show the 8 sniper positions identified by intelligence.
These 8 positions create interlocking fields of fire, what we call a death zone. Any conventional approach would result in immediate casualties. Reynolds studied the display with growing concern. "So how do we neutralize 8 snipers simultaneously?" "We don't," Alexis replied. "We neutralize them sequentially in a specific order that creates a temporary blind spot, a shadow corridor through which the assault team can move." She demonstrated the concept with a simulation on the tactical display. "I'll begin by eliminating this position first," she explained, indicating the northernmost sniper nest. "This will create a momentary disruption in their defensive network. Before they can adjust, I'll take out the second position here, expanding the blind spot. Each elimination will be timed to maximize the growing corridor until your assault team has a clear path to the compound." Brooks looked skeptical. "That's a lot of shots in a very short time frame." 8 shots in under 2 minutes, Alexis confirmed, "for multiple firing positions that I'll need to move between rapidly." "That's nearly impossible," Reynolds objected. "The terrain alone would make that kind of movement extremely difficult." Alexis turned to face him directly. "Petty Officer Reynolds, what's your longest confirmed kill in combat?" Reynolds straightened slightly.
1,100 meters in Kandahar, confirmed by forward observer. Impressive, Lexis acknowledged. My longest is 1,870 meters in the Hindu Kush Mountains, moving target 30-knot crosswind at night. The cabin fell silent as the SEAL operators processed this information. The challenge isn't the shooting, Alexis continued. It's understanding the meteorological dynamics of this particular valley. The mountains create unique wind patterns that change with temperature variations throughout the day. She pulled out a small notebook and began sketching detailed wind models. These mountains form what's called a Venturi effect in this section of the valley. Wind speed increases by approximately 40% as it funnels through this narrowing, creating a predictable bullet drift pattern that can be pre-calculated. Wilson watched her work with growing amazement. This went beyond standard military sniper training. This was advanced atmospheric physics applied to ballistic trajectories. The most critical factor, Alexis continued, is understanding how the temperature differential between the sun-facing and shadow sides of the valley create microcurrents that affect bullet drop at extreme distances. Hayes leaned forward, genuinely interested despite his initial skepticism. How do you compensate for those variables? With this, Alexis replied, producing a small, specialized weather meter. This device measures barometric pressure, humidity, temperature, and wind speed at my location. I then apply correction factors based on distance and elevation to create a firing solution for each target. She turned to Wilson. Chief, you're familiar with the traditional density-altitude calculation for long-range shooting. Wilson nodded. Standard procedure for anything beyond 800 meters. The method I use builds on that foundation, Alexis explained, but incorporates what my father called path segment analysis, dividing the bullet's journey into multiple sections and calculating environmental effects for each segment separately. The technical discussion was interrupted as Commander Richards approached with a tablet displaying new intelligence. We have updated thermal imaging of the compound, she announced grimly, and it confirms Lieutenant Morgan's theory about a 9th sniper position. She displayed the new imagery, which showed a heat signature in a location no one had previously identified, a narrow cave opening high on the eastern ridge, perfectly positioned to observe the entire valley. That position has line of sight to all potential insertion routes, Hayes observed, immediately recognizing the tactical significance. If that shooter isn't neutralized first, this entire operation is compromised. The problem, Richards continued, is that the position is approximately 2,200 meters from the nearest viable firing position for our counter-sniper. That's beyond the effective range of standard military sniper systems. All eyes turned to Alexis, who studied the new intelligence with calm focus. Not beyond the range of my ShyTac, she said quietly. With the custom loads, I can reach 2,300 meters effectively. You're talking about a shot that fewer than 10 people in the world could make, Wilson pointed out. Under ideal conditions, these will be far from ideal. I'm aware of the difficulty, Chief, Alexis replied, her confidence unwavering, but there's something else you should know about the surgeon. She pulled up an old personnel file on her tablet, a partially redacted CIA document from the early 1990s. His real name is Victor Orlov, former KGB sniper who defected during the collapse of the Soviet Union. The CIA recruited him for their Special Activities Division, where he trained American operatives in advanced Soviet sniper techniques. Wilson's eyes widened with recognition. Orlov, I've heard that name before. Your father mentioned him once, said he was brilliant but unstable. He was my father's instructor for 6 months in 1992, Alexis confirmed, and later he became mine as well. The cabin fell silent as everyone processed this revelation. Nikolai, Wilson said quietly, putting the pieces together. Your Russian trainer, he was Victor Orlov. Alexis nodded slowly. The man who taught me everything I know about long-range precision shooting is the same man who arranged my father's death in Mogadishu. The same man who killed my mother 5 years ago. The same man who's holding those hostages right now. Why would he train you? Reynolds asked, confusion evident on his face. To create a worthy opponent, Alexis replied simply. The surgeon doesn't just kill. He plays games, complex, deadly games designed to prove his superiority. Training me, making me into a weapon, was just the first move in a game 30 years in the making. Wilson understood the implications immediately. This entire situation, the hostages, the compound, the sniper positions, it's all been orchestrated specifically for you. Yes, Alexis confirmed. But what the surgeon doesn't realize is that while he was teaching me his techniques, I was studying him, learning his patterns, his preferences, his weaknesses. For 15 years, I've been preparing for exactly this confrontation. The aircraft intercom crackled to life. 20 minutes to drop zone, prepare for a HIO insertion. As the team moved to don their oxygen masks and check their parachute systems, Wilson pulled Alexis Morgan aside one last time. Mark would be proud of you, he said quietly, but he wouldn't want you to sacrifice yourself for vengeance. Alexis checked her weapon one last time, her movements precise and controlled. This isn't about vengeance, Chief, she replied, her voice carrying absolute conviction. It's about justice and completing the mission my father started 30 years ago. As the C-17's rear ramp began to lower, revealing the star-filled night beyond, Alexis Morgan stepped to the edge, the Shy-Tac rifle secured against her body, her eyes fixed on the darkness that would soon envelop her. In that moment, she was her father's daughter in every way, a ghost hunter preparing to confront the shadows of the past. The green jump light illuminated, casting an eerie glow across the determined faces of the operators. "See you on the ground, Chief," Alexis said, and then she was gone, vanishing into the night sky, falling to a confrontation 30 decades in the making. Wilson watched her disappear, a single thought echoing in his mind. The surgeon believed he had set the perfect trap, but he had no idea what was coming for him. 30,000 feet above the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, Alexis Morgan plummeted through frigid darkness. The oxygen mask hissed rhythmically as she maintained perfect aerodynamic position, the Shy-Tac rifle creating asymmetrical drag that required constant adjustment, a challenge few operators would attempt. 4 seconds into freefall, she deployed her ram air parachute. Through night vision goggles, the landscape transformed into glowing green ridgelines and pitch-black valleys. 5 additional canopies bloomed behind her, Hayes, Reynolds, Brooks, and 2 additional SEAL operators spreading in textbook formation. Ghost Hunter Poseidon, lead. Wind conditions? Hayes' voice crackled. High-altitude winds steady northwest at 25 knots. Prepare for
turbulence as we descend, Alexis replied, checking her wrist-mounted instrument. The 6 operators began their long, silent glide toward destiny. Unlike conventional insertions with aircraft noise, the hi-ho approach was ghostly quiet, only soft wind through parachute cells betraying their presence. Wilson provided guidance from the circling command aircraft. Ghost Hunter Granite satellite shows temperature inversion forming, expects significant downdrafts on eastern approach. As they descended, Alexis recognized formations from satellite imagery. The distinctive ridge concealing the terrorist compound, the narrow valley providing the only viable approach, and the deadly funnel created by surrounding peaks. Perfect terrain for an ambush. Through enhanced optics, a momentary flash caught her attention. Too disciplined for a careless error, too brief for standard signaling. Granite, possible signature at grid Echo 79er, request FAR scan. Scanning now, Wilson replied. Thermal shows 3 heat signatures not in our brief. Configuration suggests mobile electronic warfare unit. Alexis processed this rapidly. Electronic warfare meant potential disruption of communications and navigation. Recommend radio discipline from this point, possible signal interception. As they descended further, Wilson's voice returned. Satellite picking up unusual heat signatures near primary landing zone, possible prepositioned welcome party. The surgeon was anticipating their approach with uncomfortable accuracy. This wasn't just good intelligence. This was intimate knowledge of U.S. Special Operations protocols. Poseidon team adjusts to secondary LZ, she transmitted. I'll proceed to tertiary position solo. Hayes objected immediately. Negative. Team integrity is essential. The mission profile requires separate overwatch position, Alexis countered. This was always the plan. After brief hesitation, confirmed. Proceed to tertiary rendezvous as planned. Alexis banked sharply, breaking formation toward a rocky outcropping 3 kilometers east. The maneuver would place her in perfect overwatch position, but leave her isolated without immediate support, exactly as the surgeon would expect. Her boots touched earth with practiced precision. Within seconds, she established a defensive position, scanning for threats through advanced night vision. The mountainside lay silent, but instinct told her she was being watched. This was confirmed when her radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. "Welcome to my mountains, little ghost." The voice was cultured, bearing traces of Russian accent beneath years of careful Americanization. "I've been waiting for this reunion." The surgeon had made first contact. The game had begun. Dawn painted the mountains in blood-red hues. From her concealed position, Alexis surveyed the valley, methodically mapping each feature, shadow, and potential threat. 3 kilometers west, Hayes and his team had established their staging position. Through encrypted radio, their status reports came at precise intervals, using a code system designed to reveal minimum information. Poseidon in position, tides favorable. Alexis shifted attention to the compound, a collection of structures nestled against the mountainside. The main building stood in the center, surrounded by smaller structures housing guards and equipment. Watching over this fortress were the surgeon's sentinels, 8 sniper positions commanding every approach. Through high-powered optics, she occasionally glimpsed movement, the subtle shift of a rifle barrel, the repositioning of a spotter. The 9th position, the one she had predicted, remained elusive. She identified a probable location in a natural cave on the eastern ridge, but no movement had been detected. "Command is growing anxious about timeline," Wilson transmitted. "Window for extraction narrows with each hour. Establishing firing solution parameters." "Now," Alexis replied softly. From her rucksack, she withdrew specialized equipment. A Kestrel 5700 Elite weather meter, measuring wind speed, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and density altitude. A laser rangefinder, accurate to within 1 meter at 2 miles. A notebook filled with handwritten calculations specific to her weapon. Current conditions: temperature 58 degrees Fahrenheit, rising. Barometric pressure 24.87 inches of mercury. Humidity 23%. Wind variable between 3 and 12 knots, shifting with the valley heating. These weren't ideal conditions. The rising sun rapidly changed the valley's meteorological profile, creating thermal currents affecting bullet trajectory unpredictably. "How long until you can begin neutralizing overwatch positions?" Hayes asked, tension evident. "Minimum 3 hours," Alexis replied honestly. "Valley conditions highly unstable during morning thermal transition." Wilson supported her assessment. "At these distances, environmental factors are critical. Rush her and we lose our advantage." As she continued gathering data, the surgeon's voice returned. "I taught you patience, little ghost. But did I teach you enough? Your father lacked patience in Somalia. It cost him everything." Alexis maintained discipline, refusing to engage with psychological warfare. Instead, she established her mobile sniper data processing center. Ruggedized devices calculating precise firing solutions for each target. "Movement at compound entrance," Reynolds reported. 3 armed tangos escorting what appears to be 1 hostage. Through powerful optics, Alexis watched 3 armed men lead a civilian male into the courtyard. The man's hands were bound, his face bloody from apparent beatings. "Appears to be Dr. Robert Chen, Department of Energy physicist. Status: alive but showing physical abuse." 1 armed man raised a satellite phone, an unmistakable message. They were prepared to execute hostages unless demands were met. "Command confirms reception of ransom video," Wilson reported. "They're demanding release of 3 prisoners from Guantanamo within 6 hours or executions begin." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The surgeon was accelerating his timeline, forcing them to choose between high-risk daylight assault or watching hostages die. "Primary Overwatch eliminations will commence in 90 minutes, Alexis decided. "Poseidon team prepare for assault phase immediately following final elimination." "That's well before optimal stability," Wilson cautioned. "The surgeon has forced our hand. We go with the conditions we have, not the conditions we want." Memory flooded back. Wilson sharing stories about a mission in Iraq during Operation Desert Storm. "What did you do in Basra, Chief?" she asked. "February 1991. The Republican Guard officer with the radio." Wilson's surprise was evident. "How do you know about that operation?" "My father's journals. He wrote about your impossible shot in swirling dust conditions." After hesitation, Wilson responded. 1,100 meters, 30 burn crosswinds, dust storm approaching. Republican Guard officer calling in artillery strike on civilian evacuation.
Conventional wisdom said wait, but waiting meant hundreds of casualties. What was your solution? I calculated for the pattern in the chaos. The dust moved in rhythmic eddies created by terrain. I timed my shot to brief windows of clarity between dust waves. Alexis smiled. Pattern recognition in chaos. Exactly what I'm seeing here. The valley's thermal currents follow predictable cycles tied to sun movement and terrain heating. You're proposing to time your shots to these thermal windows, Wilson realized. 8 shots, 8 windows, 8 dead snipers, Alexis confirmed. The surgeon expects me to wait for optimal conditions. He won't expect me to exploit patterns within instability. Reynolds remained skeptical. If you're off by fractions of a second or miscalculate the thermal cycle, then I miss and we all die, Alexis finished matter-of-factly. But it's our only option given the compressed timeline. She made rapid adjustments to her ballistic calculator, applying advanced fluid dynamics to precision shooting beyond standard military sniper doctrine. It's not about luck, she told Wilson. It's about understanding that sometimes the most predictable moment occurs in the heart of apparent chaos. Ghost Hunter to all elements, she transmitted. Primary operation commencing in 60 minutes. As the sun climbed higher, Alexis Morgan prepared for the most challenging series of shots any sniper had ever attempted.
Symphony of precision violence upon which 12 American lives depended. 50 minutes to 0 hour. The Afghanistan sun beat down mercilessly as the surgeon's men prepared for whatever they believed was coming. Command is proposing 2 options, Wilson explained. Option 1. Proceed with your sequential elimination plan, creating the shadow corridor for Poseidon's assault. Option 2. Nightfall assault with complete air support package. Casualties? Alexis asked. Hostages would likely take significant losses in Option 2, Wilson admitted. The surgeon would have hours to prepare. An approaching aircraft would trigger immediate executions. Then we proceed with Option 1. Hayes joined the conversation. My team is prepared to execute on your timeline, but I need your confidence level on neutralizing all 8 Overwatch positions. A fair question. The operation hinged on her ability to perform a feat of marksmanship, pushing the boundaries of human capability. 70% confidence on positions 1 through 7, she replied honestly. Position 8 problematic due to extreme range and protective barriers. And the mysterious 9th position? Unknown, Alexis admitted. I still haven't positively identified it. Wilson broke the tension with an unexpected question. Do you remember what happened to SEAL Team 3 in Mogadishu, October 1993? They attempted to extract a downed helicopter crew without adequate overwatch. 4 operators lost, 6 wounded, and why their sniper support failed. Official reports cited environmental complications, but my father's notes suggested more complexity. Your father was right, Wilson confirmed. The operation was compromised before it began. The militia knew exactly where our Overwatch positions would be established because someone had provided them with our standard operating procedures. Hayes caught on immediately. You're suggesting the surgeon was that someone. It fits the timeline, Wilson replied. Victor Orlov was assigned to CIA operations in the Horn of Africa during that period. Had access to Joint Special Operations protocols. Alexis absorbed this information. The surgeon hadn't just arranged for Mark Morgan to be targeted. He had compromised the entire operation, resulting in multiple American casualties. This changes our approach, she decided. The surgeon anticipates standard doctrine, establishment of firing positions based on maximum coverage principles. But what if we invert the methodology? Meaning, instead of positioning for optimal coverage, I'll position for optical deception, Alexis explained, using terrain to create false indicators of my location while firing from unexpected positions. Misdirection, Wilson understood immediately. He'll look for you where doctrine says you should be, not where you actually are. Alexis began modifying her plan.
The challenge would be maintaining accuracy from suboptimal positions, but tactical advantage could outweigh technical disadvantages. As she navigated the treacherous landscape toward her first firing position, Wilson shared a final piece of advice. "Victor Orlov isn't just a skilled shooter," he explained. "He's pathologically obsessed with being the best. When your father outshot him during joint training in Germany, Orlov suffered what CIA psychologists called a narcissistic injury. You're saying this 30-year vendetta began because my father beat him at his own game," Alexis summarized. "Your father didn't just beat him. He humiliated him before Joint Special Operations Command, proved American methodologies could surpass Soviet techniques. For a man whose identity was built around being the world's deadliest sniper, it was unbearable. That's why he trained me," she realized. "By defeating me, he symbolically defeats my father again. Which means he'll anticipate your every move, counter every technique, because he taught you those techniques." Alexis reached her first firing position, a narrow crevice between boulders, offering clear line of sight while concealing her profile. "Not every technique, Chief," she replied, assembling the Chaytak with swift precision. "My father taught me something Orlov never understood." "What's that?" "That precision isn't just physics and calculation, it's intuition, connection, becoming one with the environment rather than just measuring it." Through her scope, she acquired the first target, a sniper nest 950 meters away. Russian-made SVD rifle, specialized desert camouflage, Chinese-manufactured spotting scope. "In position for first elimination," she transmitted. "Poseidon team stand by for Shadow Corridor initiation." As she prepared for the first trigger pull, the surgeon's voice returned. "I know what you're planning, Alexis. The Shadow Corridor concept is clever, a technique I taught you in Wyoming, but you've overlooked one critical variable." A chill ran down her spine. How had he identified her plan so precisely? "Your father made the same mistake in Mogadishu," he continued. "He believed his understanding of the environment was superior to mine. His arrogance cost 12 American lives, not just his own." The deliberate misinformation, 12 deaths instead of actual 4, was calculated to introduce emotional distraction. "Disregard all transmissions from hostile source," she keyed briefly. "Proceeding with elimination sequence in 3 minutes." Wilson's voice provided steadying presence. "Whatever happens next, remember you've already succeeded where the surgeon failed. You transformed his teaching into something better, something honorable." Alexis drew a deep, controlled breath, centering her completely. Years of training, decades of preparation, generations of legacy, all converging on this single point in time. "Operation commencing in 60 seconds, she announced calmly. "May God have mercy on their souls, because I won't have any for theirs." The first shot broke midday stillness like thunder. Through her scope, Alexis watched the target crumple. Instantly, perfect hit at 950 meters. Before the echo died, she was already moving toward her second firing position. "Target 1 eliminated," she reported tersely, moving to position 2. The chat text settled against her shoulder once more as she acquired the second target. A sniper now alert, scanning frantically for the source of the first shot. Crack! The second shot echoed across the valley. "Target 2 eliminated, moving to position 3. In the command aircraft, Wilson watched through real-time satellite imagery. Alexis appeared as a heat signature, moving with remarkable speed across rugged terrain. "She's actually doing it," Reynolds murmured, skepticism replaced by amazement. "She's not just shooting," Wilson replied. "She's conducting a symphony." The third shot was more challenging, 1,200 meters across heat-shimmering valley. Alexis compensated for mirage effect, adjusting for visual distortion caused by rising hot air. Crack! The third target collapsed. "Target 3 eliminated, moving to position 4. This movement was most dangerous, a dash across relatively open ground. Remaining snipers fired blindly toward her general area. A bullet whisked past her ear. Another struck rock near her foot, sending stone fragments slicing into her leg. Taking fire! Continuing movement! Below, Hayes and his team waited. The shadow corridor was forming a wedge-shaped blind spot in enemy coverage that would allow their approach. Alexis reached her fourth position, blood soaking her pant leg. The fourth target was moving, attempting to relocate. A moving target at 1,400 meters presented new calculations. Lead distance, motion vectors, timing, breathe, adjust, squeeze, crack. Target 4 eliminated, moving to position 5. The fifth position required climbing a near-vertical rock face. Halfway up, disaster struck. Rock gave way beneath her hand, sending her sliding downward. Her rifle caught on an outcropping, jerking her to painful halt. "Delay!" she grunted, pulling herself upward again, resuming movement. The lost seconds were critical. The enemy would be adapting, adjusting defensive posture to account for eliminated positions. With final effort, she hauled herself onto the ledge. Target 5 was hunkered in reinforced position, presenting a target the size of a playing card at 1,350 meters. Crack! Target 5 eliminated, moving to position 6. 3 more to go. Time was becoming her enemy. The window for SEAL approach narrowed with each passing second. "Begin approach vector now," she transmitted to Hayes. "I'll eliminate remaining